This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, which is currently introducing its new base membership. What is base membership? Well, it's the FIAOMC's new free introductory membership type, designed to help educate doctors on myopia control and orthokeratology. Whether you are brand new, an experienced fitter searching for pearls, or someone who's dabbled in the past and ready to step up their game, FIAOMC base membership can help, and it's free. So what do you have to lose? Go to orthokacademy.com, click on the practitioner button, and join us. Join the war against the myopia epidemic. Welcome to the Corrected View podcast, a podcast about myopia control, ortho-K, and the people devoted to its role in specialty care. And I have with us today a panel comprised of our president, Paul Levine. Paul, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt.
And we have new board members, Cheryl Chapman and Jonathan Skoner. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So my plan to have you guys on was to talk about some buzzworthy topics that have been floating around that I've seen on the Google group that the Academy uses. I've seen it in our private Discord server that we just launched, and generally we see them on social media. And I figured, why not have you guys on to go into more depth about what these topics are, what they mean for our industry, and generally speaking, what is the Academy's opinion concerning these details. So I figured I'd get us started off with the announcement by CooperVision that Sarah Michelle Gellar has partnered with CooperVision to basically take on myopia control. And I thought that this was a really interesting move. One, because as I've mentioned lots on this podcast, when I talk about ortho-K out in the real world, most people say, I've never heard of this, and why have I never heard of this? And I think a big part of that reason is we don't have that kind of, foundational or spotlight attention that I think comes with partnering with somebody that people would listen to, like a celebrity. My question is Sarah Michelle Gellar the right person for this job? Who is the right person for this job? And is this a good move? Is this a bad move? What does this mean for industry? And we'll start with Paul. Paul, what do you think about Buffy the Vampire Slayer being a spokesperson for myopia control?
I mean, I should start off by saying I never really watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I know her name. Like, when you say her name, it means something to me. I just don't know exactly what it means, but I know, like, oh, that's a famous person. So I think that having a famous person standing up for myopia, and what CooperVision is trying to accomplish, I think is a good thing. I don't think, we're going to see her, in a boxing match against Greg Brady on, some random cable network channel. Like, she's a real celebrity. And so I think it's great. I mean, I think it's awesome. I think CooperVision has really stepped up to the plate big time. They see the value in myopia management. They understand what's at stake, and they need to get to the doctors, but they really need to get to the public, because without the public pressure, then not enough doctors are going to adopt this modality to their practices. And so I think going this kind of celebrity route is a great way to get to the people, and then the people will come back to us. So I have to super commend CooperVision. Is she the right person? I have no idea. I don't even know what the right person looks like. I don't know what that is, but anybody that can lend their name and any kind of credibility to what we are trying to do, I think is a really, really good thing.
Yeah, Cheryl, would you agree that, one of the best ways to convince a doctor that myopia control is something that they should take seriously for their practice is to actually go to the patient and have the patient say, why aren't you doing this?
I think that you have a certain number of doctors who just get super excited about myopia control, and they're going to kind of grab the bull by the horns no matter what. But I do think that there's a fair number of doctors, and probably a larger number of doctors, who need some other incentive. Because let's be honest, incorporating myopia management into your practice, at least right now, it takes effort. Anytime we do something that isn't our normal protocol, it takes effort to incorporate that. And especially now, I mean, with 2020 and coronavirus, everybody's focus just shifted over to that. And so we really need to draw that focus back to myopia management. And I was really pleased with the announcement of Sarah Michelle Gellar as their spokesperson, because I'm thinking to myself, all right, who is my target demographic? And I would say that a mom, maybe 30 to 45-year-old mom, is a pretty good target demographic. And I think women in that age group probably know who Sarah Michelle Gellar is. They probably watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Paul, you were not Buffy's target audience. But I honestly don't watch a whole lot of TV, and I didn't have cable growing up. And so the fact that I knew who Sarah Michelle Gellar was, I think says that there's probably a lot of people who know who she is. So I think it's a fantastic choice. And I do think we need to put pressure from the public on this topic so that more doctors will be convinced that it's worthy of their time and effort. Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of the video that CooperVision released, and I'll link to it in the show notes for the episode, and Sarah Michelle Gellar mentions the role that myopia has had in the effect of her husband, and her family. And I think that's exactly the kind of message that you need to put forward. And, with no offense to Sarah Michelle Gellar, like when you think of like who you would want to talk about myopia control, like we're kind of at a place where it's like almost anyone will do, and Jonathan, like, would you agree with that? That as long as it's not like, as long as it's somebody that people recognize, like any kind of attention that we can put on this is a valuable effort.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Paul brought up a good point. What does the ideal representative look like or sound like? And there, because this is such a new topic to really a majority of the public out there, no one has any preconceived notions about what to expect when they hear it coming from a spokesperson. So I think it's a bold first step. Maybe down the road, I envision it expanding to a team of representatives, a team of celebrities that all support this or endorse this myopia control opportunity. And I don't know, maybe it turns into a movement down the road. Maybe this is the start of a myopia control movement that would parallel the Think About Your Eyes movement that you saw all the commercials for. I don't, whether or not she's the right person, I just think it's an important first step, and it can only be positive.
Yeah, I agree. It reminds me, kind of like hearing you say that reminds me of the early days of the Academy when we were the Orthokeratology Academy of America. And this was like really early days, like I want to say 2006. And we were trying to come up with some sort of media strategy. And we had gotten approached by somebody who claimed to represent a group of celebrities that would, for a price, they would all endorse, your product or service or whatever the case may be. And they said they were really interested in what, Ortho-K, and they had done a little bit of research. And after we couldn't do anything with it because we couldn't afford it. It was a bunch of celebrities that eventually, after we looked into it, ended up being like Vern Troyer and William Shatner. And I think Mr. T was on that list, although maybe I'm misremembering it. But I can't verify that these people were actually involved in this. But after we did some research, we were like, this is a conglomerate of actors or celebrities or personalities that are willing to lend their name to it. And when I began like visualizing, like what would it look like to have like Captain Kirk and Mini-Me and Mr. T talk about myopia control, I was like, I don't know if that's exactly what we want to put forward as far as the image. Like if you had to think of like a dream team of personalities and celebrities to talk about this, like I would much rather have somebody like Sarah Michelle Gellar, who I think, people do respect, and she's had the kind of career that isn't a gimmick, and she has a credible place, especially in the geek community, which is how I'm familiar with her. as far as Buffy is concerned and whatnot, even though I didn't watch that show, but I definitely heard a lot about it from my friends that I should be watching that show. So I guess my question is, what can we do? Like, where do we want this to go as the next step? Like, what's the ideal situation? Paul, you're the president of the Academy. If we had that opportunity today, because we're a nonprofit organization, if we had that opportunity, what should happen next?
The opportunity being if we had a celebrity spokesperson for what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, if Sarah Michelle Gellar is going to kick us off with CooperVision, where do we see this going? Like, what's the next step?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say because it's new. It's we haven't really experienced it before. But it's all about awareness, right? So it's awareness to the parents, it's awareness to the patients, but it's awareness to the public in general that eye care matters, And so, even if you take myopia off the table for a minute, it's like people just don't know that even you can get a checkup even if your vision's not blurry. And the earlier, so my goal would be to try to utilize a spokesperson, not just to manage myopia, but to get kids in at an early enough age, because we can see the signs. When you can get the 6 or 7 year old that has not yet become a myope, that's the time to start myopia control, because we know that that's the time to get the kids outside. And the studies have shown that, getting the kids outside after the myopia starts is not as effective as getting them outside before. So in addition to the general awareness of myopia, I think a general awareness of get your kids' eyes checked by the time they're 4 or 5 years old is probably like #1 priority in my mind.
Gotcha. All right.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Does anybody know, I don't know off the top of my head, how many states now require vision exams prior to kindergarten?
I don't think it's very many. I can tell you that. I don't think it's many.
Pennsylvania does not.
Okay, Nebraska does now. And I agree. I think it's really important to get these kids in. And I will just plug a little bit for measuring axial length because I know some of you know I'm very adamantly for that. And so one thing that I do in my practice is when I get these kids in for their very first eye exam, if we can get an autorefraction on them, most likely we can get an axial length measurement because it's that easy if you have the right equipment. And so I use that, I put that in my toolbox to say, hey, wow, look at that, we've got a baseline, and oh, maybe this kid isn't as hyperopic as we would expect for this age. Boy, they're sure at risk for, becoming nearsighted as a young age. And that's a fantastic conversation to start having with the parents because you're planting all these seeds. So then a year from now or 2 years from now, when they do transition into myopia and you're trying to talk to them about myopia control or myopia management, it's no longer a new idea to them.
Well put. All right. Does anyone have anything to add on Sarah Michelle Gellar partnering with CooperVision?
Only just that we have to get her to vision by design.
Yeah, I was going to say, why not have that be the next step, right?
Exactly.
Work out. I mean, what kind of, that'd be pretty stellar celebrity spot, right? To get Sarah Michelle Gellar at Vision by Design. And so.
That'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Maybe we should start talking to Cooper now.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
Cooper's always been a really good friend of the Academy, so.
For sure. And speaking of Cooper, that's a great transition into our next topic, which is CooperVision buys C&E GP Specialist. So for the completely uninitiated, what can you say about C&E GP Specialists? Like, what are they and what does this mean? Jonathan, who is C&E GP Specialist and what does this purchase mean?
You'll have to excuse me. I'm not familiar with the C&E part, but okay. In regard, I don't know if that's just the full name of GP Specialist. I know GP Specialist quite well, but GP Specialist being a lab out in California, they do a lot of custom RGP hard lens surfacing and design. They're willing to basically work with you and do something fully custom, even if you draw it on a piece of paper. They'll help you design it. So I've always found them to be a really friendly and assistive lab. You know, you talk to someone there who knows what they're doing, and they're very helpful. So, and they've always to me, I started actually fitting Ortho-K personally with the IC lens through GP. That's their brand. And,
Okay. Yeah.
And that lens provided me a lot of growth opportunity. So they took the bull by the horns and created that design, and then they grew it into something now, which is a very successful Ortho-K and a moderately advanced Ortho-K lens design. So I think in regards to orthokeratology and the academy, I think that GP specialist means a lot to the academy. I know some people that only trust GP specialists. So I think it was kind of an interesting move and really exciting move, with a little bit of caution that Cooper acquired GP Specialists, because it shows that they're serious in the specialty lens market, as we'll talk about a little later with some of their newer designs and acquiring almost a purely specialized lab. I think that shows a lot of promise with Cooper. I just worry that, I don't know, sometimes I feel like they may be spreading a little thin. So I hope that they can keep up the same quality and the control that I've always known GP to have. I have a lot of faith in them, so I think they can. But that would be my concern. And also too, I know Cooper does some things with the private labels with lenses. You know, you have your Biofinity lens, and they have the same lens. I think it's at Walmart, and it's called the Aqua Clear. And they've always done a few things like that I haven't really appreciated as a private practitioner. That kind of, to me, is a little bit confusing from a consumer's perspective. But I think, hey, if any company is really taking the lead in myopia control, to me, it's got to be Cooper. So hopefully I see this all as a good thing moving forward. I don't know, maybe others can chime in on that.
Paul, this kind of started with them acquiring Paragon Vision Sciences, in my opinion. Can you speak a little bit about that and a little bit about what Jonathan had said?
Well, I think that Cooper is smart. I think that they're jumping into into this at the right time. I think that the amount of revenue and cash that they can bring into this system is huge. I think it's a huge infusion of resources that we might not have otherwise had. You know, Ortho-K especially is such a smaller component of eye care. And when you get a big giant like CooperVision to show how important they think it is, I think that lends credibility to what we're all doing. I think that buying Paragon was a huge and awesome move by them. I think it was really smart. But we all know that the Paragon menu of lenses has very limited parameters. I mean, you can fit a wide variety of patients with their lenses, but they don't have a customizable component to that. And I think that probably is why they reached out and bought GP, because of the IC lens, which is a customizable product. So they've now really spread themselves into both the standard lens market and the customizable lens market. So I think at the end of the day, that's all good for us. I'll comment a little bit about the private label stuff, just because you brought it up, Jonathan. I tend to agree with you. I don't really love that idea, and whenever it's been brought to me in my practice with other products, like we can private label this or we can private label that, I've always rejected the notion, because I felt that it was a little bit disingenuous. So but that was a decision I think that was made by CooperVision a long time ago, and probably the people that made those decisions aren't even the people making the decisions today. So I really do see Cooper as a partner in my private practice with my soft lens, part of the practice. But I'm super, super excited and thrilled that they're spreading deeper into the Ortho-K market. And I know they're keeping Mark Cosgrove on as the lead man at GP. So I really do think that they will give him the resources he needs to even be more successful, and I don't think they're going to take it away from him. So I'm really excited, for the prospect of how much GP can grow.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, Mark Cosgrove is, he's like the nicest guy in the world, and I enjoy. He's one of the many people that I enjoy seeing every year at Vision by Design, and you always hear good things about him. And Paragon has supported the AAOMC for like going back almost to the very, very beginning, and the same with GP Specialists. Mark Cosgrove has been a supporter, and the company has been a supporter of Vision by Design and the AAOMC going way back. So we have great relationships with both of those companies, and it's exciting to see where this might go with CooperVision. Cheryl, do you have any experience with GP Specialists?
I have only fit a few of their lenses. I fit a different customizable lens mostly, but I did work with Mark one time on a case, kind of back in the early days, and yeah, I found it to be a really good experience. I'm just, again, kind of like Paul and Jonathan, I'm really pleased that CooperVision is paying attention to orthokeratology as well, because one of my concerns when the MiSight lens was introduced was that CooperVision was going to put all of this marketing behind myopia management with a soft lens. And I was concerned it was going to be really hard to portray the message that we want to about the benefits of orthokeratology. And so seeing them kind of wrap their arms around ortho-K and embrace that as well gives me a lot of hope. And I also think, again, the amount of influence that they have in the industry and the amount of power they have with regards to marketing is going to help us bring our message to patients so much more efficiently than we would be able to do without them.
Excellent point. Yeah. Does anybody have anything else they want to say about this acquisition before we move on?
I'd add one more quick thing. I think, bouncing off what we all said, it's exciting. It almost seems like kind of a power move to me. I'm wondering, because of CooperVision, it seems like they're being almost kind of aggressive in a good way in trying to get the corner in myopia control in the market. And they have so much money. They're such a big company. They have so much funding, as Paul pointed out. It makes me wonder if they are maybe looking into the data trends with analytics and computers and maybe statistics, scientists who are going to study all the statistics and more or less going to predict what we've all been saying all along. So, that myopia control is going to be necessary. I mean, it already is necessary, but it's going to become even more necessary, more commonplace in the future. So, I don't know. I'm excited. I think it's an excitingly aggressive move, and maybe they see a lot of potential there that they're trying to block out the other bigger companies, and because they see the potential. So.
It's a great point. I mean, with these kind of moves, are we going to see more of a interest from, other bigger companies that want to invest in this space and, who are taking myopia control and ortho-K more seriously? I mean, I heard someone today say, where would Apple be today without Android, without Google? And what that kind of competition does in that space and produces the best possible products and services for the consumers. So are there any other moves like that can be made in this space? I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, so on to the next. Our next topic has to do with the Blink study, and this has to do with a link that was sent to me for an article published on August 17th in a little publication called the New York Times, which said contact lenses may slow nearsightedness in children. And this was mentioning the Blink study in the New York Times. And I thought that was very newsworthy considering. Paul, why don't you give us a rough overview of what is the Blink study and why is this important?
Well, the Blink study, what it looked at was it was comparing ultimately back to CooperVision again, the Biofinity multifocal lens, and it looked at using the 150 distance ad versus the 250 distance ad. And what they found was that there was a significant or a statistically significant finding that when you use the 250 ad, they were able to control myopia over a 3-year period by, I think it was 46% compared to controls, and I think axial length progression by like 36 or 38%. I forget the exact numbers. It showed that the 150D lens did not have, it showed it was better than control, but it was not statistically significant. So the result was use the 250 ad, and you may need to add, push a little bit of minus into those lenses because you are putting so much plus into that mid-peripheral part of the lens. It also looked at the safety of a monthly lens design because with our kids and with the MiSight lens and with the natural view lens, a lot of doctors want to fit their kids in daily disposables. So this looked at the safety profile of the monthly replacement lens, and there were close to 10% of the entire cohort had adverse event, but of those adverse events, a lot of them were very, very mild and minimal type situations like allergies. For instance, there was only, I think, 9 out of over 300 that had any kind of an infectious situation that occurred. So I think it's a cool study. I think it reinforces what many of us that do this already know, which is you got to put the highest ad power you can on these kids to gain some degree of control. So I think it's a good study, and I think that it's great that it's getting public press.
Mm-hmm. What do you think that this will do now, having that kind of public spotlight on it from the New York Times? Like, what does that mean for the future? Jonathan, what do you think?
Well, I think the New York Times is one of the most widely read journals in the world. So that's for sure going to get some international attention. I think it'll get a lot of thought leaders and a lot of larger corporations paying attention to it. I'm hoping by being in such a prominent journal. I like that. I like that personally about the study. I like that it was a double-masked study. That made me excited. It added a little more validity to everything, in my opinion. The results themselves, they were promising, and I don't know. I think you can dig into some of the details of the study and kind of nerd out on it a little bit if you want, and we could probably have an hour discussion on it. But ultimately, as Paul said, the end result plus 250 distance ad was a nice alternative for some people who may not be comfortable fully jumping into myopia control. My only concern with it is I hope that you're not going to get a lot of novice ODs that aren't familiar necessarily with myopia control in the academy and what it's actually all about. And I hope that they don't take this and necessarily run with it and say, well, I can get a 43% reduction in myopia, in the rate of myopia progression, if I fit them in a plus 250D lens. Mm-hmm. I hope that they don't take that and run with it and say, well, that's myopia control. Why do I have to do anything further? I hope that they peel back that layer and layer more to want to find out that this is just really the tip of the iceberg, because this is a commonplace lens. And when you want to start getting more aggressive in treatment and more customized in your treatment, there's many more options beyond this.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because when we try to talk with docs about myopia control and ortho-K and the effects of myopia, we keep getting this response, and I have no problem with this response about show me the studies, show me the science, show me the information to back that up. And I think it's important to understand that's something you see in a lot of our circles is here's an update on the Blink study and what we need to understand about it. So Cheryl, what are the critical points as far as communicating this? Kind of like what Jonathan was saying, what are the critical points that need to be understood about the Blink study moving forward?
Well, I think it's always really important for us to be aware of studies that are out there because our patients, they're seeing this. And, I kind of think of something like this as it's in the New York Times. It's not like I'm all of a sudden going to have just a flood of patients reading this and then calling my office and saying, oh my goodness, I need this. But what it does is it validates us. So when I'm there talking to a parent and telling them about this and they're thinking it might be voodoo, it might be hocus pocus, then they go home and they do a Google search and they see, oh, well, the New York Times had an article about this. And so it just really validates what we're doing and what we're trying to tell our patients. And kind of going back, to what Jonathan was talking about, I am not as concerned that doctors are just going to take this and run with it. I see it like a gateway for them. And they might just try it here and there. And, I always hear people say, well, we don't want doctors to just dabble in myopia management. And I absolutely agree with that. But I think we do need to entice them. And if they have something that they can try that's really not that hard and they see success with it, then perhaps it kind of lights a spark in them and kind of maybe can create a passion where now, okay, I'm interested. So maybe now let me learn a little bit more about that. Oh, I see now there's daily disposable options too. And oh, I see that, maybe the effectiveness of that higher ad is more. Or, oh, wow, well, maybe I want to learn more about atropine. And then finally, that harder step, orthokeratology. Boy, I wish I could do this with that patient, but boy, they really aren't going to do well in a soft lens. Let's start tackling orthokeratology. And so I do see it as just a really fantastic introduction for a lot of doctors. And I don't know if I actually answered your question very directly.
You did. Yeah, you did.
But yeah, those are just kind of the thoughts that roll around in my head about this.
So if we could design, and I'm not saying we should just do it now, right? But if we could design because we don't want dabblers, and that's a message that's been repeated over and over and over again with everybody that I've spoken with in the FIAOMC. You have people who come from those different backgrounds of getting into myopia control. And there's a lot of people that start with dabbling. Maybe it didn't work out, or maybe they only did a few cases. And what is it really going to take to get people from point A to point B? So, if we could develop some sort of process, what do you think what that would look like?
I just think it's so important for doctors to know where some really valuable resources are to help them understand things more, to help them simplify it, to have peer support, and to really help institute myopia management into their practice and institute it really well. And so, for anybody out there listening, I would definitely pitch the Vision by Design meeting every year. It is a meeting that focuses so much on not just orthokeratology, but also the other types of myopia management. And it's just such a lovely way to tie everything together and to help it make sense and to talk to other doctors who are doing it. I kind of want to throw that pitch out there because I don't know if all the doctors know that it's available, and it's just wonderful.
Yeah, I don't think that a lot do. I think this is an extremely intimidating process for a lot of optometrists out there. And Paul, we've implemented various methods for our membership to communicate, including we have our Google group and our Discord server. And, recently we launched a new base membership, which is like an introductory membership option because, education is our primary goal. And, if you're looking at our standard membership and the benefits that you get from that, we've opened the doors and said, well, why don't you become a base member? It's free and you get a fraction of the benefits that standard members get. One of those benefits is coming into our Google group and our Discord server and being able to ask those kind of questions. And it's crazy to me how people, I don't know, maybe it's just my personality, right? If I want to know something, I just start asking questions. I don't care how stupid I look. I don't have any pride, right? If I need to know something, I'll just start asking questions about it because that's who I am. And it's crazy to me that people would come into a community, like we even have a Facebook group, and it's got tons of people in there. It's crazy to me that people just don't start asking questions, and it's almost frustrating to a certain extent, because it's like we have this information, we have this resource. What do you think is that next step for us? Like, we open that door to that free membership. We can't do Vision by Design, unfortunately, right now because of the pandemic, but I'm always interested to hear what people have to think about, bridging that gap.
So I think it's really interesting that you talk about how people don't just ask those questions, but a lot of people are intimidated. They're intimidated that they're going to be called out as not looking intelligent, or that somebody's going to tell them that was a stupid question. What I love most about the new Discord group that you started with the FIAOMC is that it's so simple and easy to use on your phone, and to just see those conversations, and the way you've sectioned out, like you've got the section just for articles. So if I want to go and see, well, what is that Blink study again? And there's the link to the Blink study right there. And I think it's really neat for doctors who maybe are afraid to speak up, that they can see these conversations happening in that Discord group. So that's just really a great starting point to answer your question. That's a great starting point. And I think that free-based membership is wonderful too, because that is like no strings attached, no commitment, just they don't even have to really participate. They can just be creepers and just watch the conversation until they feel comfortable kind of asking a question here or there.
Right. When we, because we're doing the beta test process of the Discord server at the time we're recording this in September. And, when I reached out to a lot of people and said, hey, we're trying this out, why don't you come make an account and be a part of the conversation? And there was a fair amount of people that were just like, I don't know if I would be right for it, because I only have like really basic questions to ask. And I'm like, that's why we started it. Come in and start asking the basic questions. Like, let's get it going here, So yeah, I agree with you.
On the Discord group, there's been basic discussions. No one should be afraid to post anything. I mean, people are discussing, hashing out old topics. We're discussing what's the best solution to use with Ortho-K, lenses. I mean, you would think that's, in some people's mind, maybe it's a no-brainer. In other people's, maybe they're embarrassed because they don't know what the preferred solution is. But, when someone asks, the preferred solution, Dr. Kerry Herzberg, the legend of the Academy, he was the one who responded himself, and it generated like a 2-day-long discussion on solutions. So something as basic as solution, don't be afraid. Right.
Excellent. Very well put. And that's where we've been getting a lot of these topics. And that'll bring us to our next topic, which separate versions of it are in the Google group and the Discord server. And it has to do with the VT community and the myopia control community. So you have these two groups. We're the myopia control community. And then there's the COVD vision therapy docs. And this started originally with a post by Nate Benia-Warford, who's been a guest on this show. And he was talking about how these two communities are starting to come together, and what that means, and how we don't communicate with each other, and why that's a bad thing. Paul, I was wondering if you could give us like a brief overview of that whole dynamic, because it's been in two different places and I've been trying to pay attention to it in both of those places. But maybe you could help give us a starting summary.
Well, we all have different, we all have different passions. We all have different things that we're excited about. And, and there's a team approach to eye care and patient care in general. And a lot of things get ignored. So for instance, you might be digging into myopia control, but you're maybe leaving a lot of the binocular vision and functional vision things that you might be picking up. You're kind of leaving those off to the side a little bit. Maybe the vision therapy docs are dealing with highly myopic, progressive myopic kids who have, convergence insufficiency and reading vision problems, and that's what they're focusing on and letting the myopia kind of grow out of control. So, because it's not, their forte necessarily. So I think the melding of two different specialties, I think ultimately is in the best interest of the patient, because what we're really talking about is function. Even with myopia, myopia and high myopia causes dysfunction, and binocular vision disorders cause dysfunction, and one may lead to the other. So, for instance, if somebody is, let's just say, very, very, maybe anisometropic, and they're, a -5 in one eye and a -1 in the other eye, well, they're going to be a binocular vision, problem, because they're not going to do very well using their eyes together. That's a perfect case where you might use Ortho-K to bring those eyes back to plano, or 20/20 in each eye, and then back to the vision therapy doc to work on those functional deficits and those convergence problems and focusing dysfunctions. I think there's a tremendous opportunity there to take a holistic and global approach to our patients, whether we want to be the myopia control experts and the vision therapy docs, which some of our members do, or you want to have a network of doctors that you can refer back and forth to. Like, I've got an Ortho-K kid who's got, poor binocularity. I'm sending him to you for that. I got a vision therapy doc that's sending me a patient because, they feel that, let's get rid of the glasses altogether, and then we can deal a little bit easier with the binocular vision anomalies. So if we put those two, and we're similar in that we both represent sort of smaller corners of our industry, and we both have to deal with the fact that, sometimes it's our own people that disparage what we do. It's ODs against ODs, sometimes, that are the worst culprits. Telling us that myopia control doesn't work and Ortho-K is a hoax, and what are you all doing? And vision therapy is just a way to extract money out of your patients. While it's like, this is the stuff that we hear, and so banding together just makes us stronger, even if we do slightly different things. So, I do see it as a natural symbiotic relationship that we should be engaging more into.
Yeah, my question is basically, how much overlap is there? Because this whole kind of issue goes back for us. Originally, when we started Vision by Design, it was in the fall, and we got a lot of feedback from our members who were members of both groups. And they said, you're making it really difficult for us to go to both, the myopia control meeting and the vision therapy meeting. And so we ultimately moved to a different time frame in the spring. And then lo and behold, so that we would no longer conflict. And then lo and behold, COVD ended up moving into that time frame as well. And now we're like stepping on each other's feet constantly with both meetings, just trying to stay out of each other's way. And, I've read a lot about the possibility of doing a shared meeting of vision therapy and myopia control. And Jonathan, maybe you can weigh in on this for this next question, is that, and because all of you have a role to play in Vision by Design and have been going for years. And from my perspective as an organizer, I'm not an optometrist, so I'm an outside entity on this whole conversation. But from my opinion, I think Vision by Design should stay Vision by Design because of what it is. And I am, but is that the answer? Like, I don't want to hold things back. Like, should we be combining these two meetings?
Well, my personal opinion, I have kind of an interesting take on it. I work in a primarily heavily pediatric practice, and just making a full circle here, I didn't mention this earlier to you guys, but actually the reason I got into optometry is because I was in college and I read an article in the New York Times about optometry. Long story short, I read about this child who had convergence insufficiency. They were misdiagnosed by many different doctors of all different fields. And they found the right binocular specialist, optometrist. It took a binocular specialist back then to diagnose convergence deficiency, something relatively mainstream today, and got the kid the help they needed. So that got me into optometry, and I kind of went into optometry loving pediatric and binocular vision. Well, after I went, 3/4 of the way through school and then graduated, I became entirely fixated on orthokeratology and myopia control. So now at the practice that I work at, I'm in this dichotomous position where I love both, but I work with other doctors who do a lot of binocular vision, and they don't do as much myopia control. And I'm starting to see a little bit of the notion that Cheryl mentioned earlier, which, by the way, I'm a full supporter of: don't dabble. I think there's a saying, it's a jack of all, master of none. When I feel fully capable of diagnosing and treating binocular conditions, but also myopia control. But I've realized that there's these scenarios, as Paul was mentioning earlier, where a kid comes in and you have to tease out, is this a binocular? Is this an accommodative? Is it a perceptual issue? Is it a combination of those issues? Is there other issues involved? And by the way, where does the myopia fall into this? So there's a huge decision to be made there, that initial routing the patient gets. And from my perspective, I've started to find it more beneficial for my patient's care and for my care, that even though I'm capable of treating something binocular or accommodative or developmental, I prefer to address the myopia control aspect of things. And I find the patient gets better care and I get better satisfaction if I send them to one of my colleagues within the same practice that's capable of doing good quality binocular and accommodative and perceptual workups. So, kind of getting back to answering the question, I've always seen them as in my head together because I've always loved both topics. But the more and more I look at it now, the more advanced I've become in my career, I see them as really two separate entities, and I prefer them that way. So I like what you said, Matt, about how I also personally believe, I think the vision by design should continue to stay separate, but to not allow dabbling. I think it's important that, if someone is all, fully invested into binocular and developmental vision, maybe they should be able to diagnose something as simple as, hey, this is a highly progressive myopic child, or there's signs here that they're going to be highly progressive. Just like I can say, okay, this is a pretty slam dunk convergence insufficiency case, and I know how I treat you, but I'm going to send you to my colleague here. I would like them to be able to come to our meeting and say, hey, this is a scenario where maybe it's a little out of my realm, but I know just the right person who can treat this, someone who is fully invested in the academy. Just like I hope for our Vision by Design Academy, we're doing the same thing with binocular issues. That's just my personal look on things, but I found a lot of retrospective insight on things that I don't know. I like them separate, but I have a lot of fascination for both. But I think ultimately it's better off if I separate them.
Gotcha. And Cheryl, do you agree with that sentiment? What is your history with myopia and vision therapy? And maybe there's a different way that we can work together that doesn't involve the two meetings.
Yeah, I thought that Jonathan really had some fantastic points, and I thought it was really very well articulated. I do think that it's really important for doctors to focus on what they really want to do and get really, really good at it, so that we have, different doctors that we can go to for different needs. And I do see also what Nate is talking about, where he's wishing that the two talked more. And I think I would prefer to see Vision by Design stay mostly Vision by Design. But I think it's nice to always give people awareness to not ignore the binocular. I think a lot of doctors who are drawn to myopia management, and really, especially those who really like orthokeratology, they're not necessarily the same type of doctors who love binocular vision, mostly because I think a lot of doctors don't like binocular vision. And so I think giving them enough awareness that it is an issue, and like feeding them a little bit of information so that they know, okay, I should be checking accommodation on these kids. I should be maybe checking their lag, but giving them also the tools to not be intimidated by that, because, you know, maybe they haven't really even thought about that since they graduated 10, 15, however many years ago, to kind of revisit those topics. But I think it's also important for them to know that it is okay if you want to do orthokeratology, like Paul was saying, if you want to do orthokeratology on this kid, but then have kind of your local guy who's really, really great at binocular vision to work together, to work in concert and address both problems. But I am definitely for vision by design, staying more focused on soft multifocal contact lenses, orthokeratology, atropine, those sorts of things.
Gotcha. And Paul, you know, you and I had a little bit of a discussion a couple of weeks ago about the possibility of opening up the Discord server to the VT docs that Nate is mentioning and starting that dialogue. So what is that dialogue like? What kind of conversation do we need to have with each other moving forward?
Well, I think the best conversations that we have is how to find patients that can be helped by the other person's specialty, right? So how to be aware, what would be the best way, what would be the ideal patient for me to refer to a vision therapy doc? What would be the ideal patient for a vision therapy doc to refer to me? I think that's where the discussion should be. What components to my exam can I learn from the behavioral ODs that I should be adding that's going to help me understand a little bit better in a relatively short amount of time what kind of visual system I'm dealing with, and vice versa. You know, give them the tools to look at myopia a little bit differently. And so I think opening those channels is a really good thing. You know, what I didn't mention before is that my practice, which is primary care, is it's a partnership, and my business partner is a card-carrying behavioral OD, fellow of COVD, clinical instructor for OEP. You know, he lives and breathes vision therapy and binocular vision disorders. And he wants nothing to do with the ortho-K stuff. He refers all of it to me, and I refer all of the binocular stuff to him. It's awesome to have that because, first of all, he's in the next room, so it's really easy. But even if he were across town, it's nice to be able to support your patient in every way that they need support. And so, you know, I think having better awareness of what each group does and can do and can offer for their patients, that's where the dialogue should be. And facilitating OD referrals is the biggest crime, you know, that we have as an industry, is that we don't do enough of that. So you know, that's where I see it.
Co-management system in place for, you know, because like Jonathan pointed out, you know, you can't do everything, right? So, you know, we don't, as far as having a system in place to help the patient ultimately and share between the two groups. And because not everybody is going to be in your situation or in any of your situations with the different models you use or resources you have at your disposal. So in order to facilitate that process, I think we need to get that conversation started. I think I'm going to reach out to Nate and say, how can we bring these two groups together? And if we can't, you know, maybe we have, you know, a VT element at Vision by Design instead of combining the two meetings and vice versa. Or maybe the two organizations work together in some capacity. I mean, especially now with the pandemic, and we can't even really have in-person meetings. So maybe we need to start some sort of virtual education solution between the two. So I'm definitely going to reach out to him about that. Do we have any final words on this topic before we wrap things up?
I can add one quick comment here.
Okay.
I think both fields are pioneer thinkers in ortho-K, myopia control, and developmental vision. If you think about it, both fields really have a lot in common because we're both pushing the envelope of what we know to be scientifically proven, but also clinically effective. And so we're pushing ahead the research independently, but there's so much overlap. They're not mutually exclusive. You know, I have so many patients who are in vision therapy who are also being treated with orthokeratology, and there is a huge benefit to have a conversation with the person who is with those two people that are treating them, because, you know, how's ortho-K, for example, and it could be multifocal soft contacts or atropine. How is it going to affect their vision therapy outcomes and their retesting? Is their exo or ESO going to increase? Is their accommodative focal point going to shift? You know, there's a lot of fun stuff, and I think if we build on the fun positives of it, and I've noticed some people tend to get a little bit defensive about it. Well, I can treat that. I don't need to refer out. I can do this. I can take care of this. I don't know. I think if people focus on the exciting part of it, the fact that we're trying to push the envelope, we're trying to take care of the same issue, different perspectives, and how can we learn from each other? I think it could be really positive. This is a thought.
All right, well said. And I think we're going to end on that. So I want to say thank you to our president, Paul Levine, and our two brand new spanking new board members, Cheryl Chapman and Jonathan Skoner. And we'll be back with another episode. There's definitely plenty to talk about right now in our industry and in our world. So thank you everyone for coming on, and we'll see you all again for the next episode of The Corrected View.